Hey, it's Drybear, back again with our Diablo 4 build guide, and today we're going to be talking about my Sanguine Tide Necro build, which focuses on Overpower, Fortify, and the Blood Surge ability, which is effectively a Blood Nova. There's some really cool modifiers and legendaries that we can add to it that makes it multiple explosions, almost like you're a Blood water park walking through the room. There's also ways where you can make that echo come out of your minions as well, and have tons of blood just flying over the place and just crushing people with a tsunami of blood. But first, you should come hang out with me on my live stream. I'm live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear. If you don't come hang out with me and the community, then the next time you go to a fast food restaurant with your friend, you're both going to order fries, but their fries are accidentally going to be upgraded to curly fries and yours won't. All right, let's talk about the Blood Surge or Blood Nova build, the Sanguine Tide. This one I'm super excited about. I want to see what the upper level of this is going to be, but if you're looking for a build sheet, I have it down below in the description. It is on my build list on d4builds.gg. You can look at this. It has all legendaries, gems, abilities, minions, a full skill tree up to level 50 with all the points allocated, and a first rough pass on what the Paragon board would look like. And again, the disclaimer is here because without knowing exactly all of the endgame content we're going to be facing with, what it feels like, testing it out and actually trying it, we don't know exactly how to build these Paragon boards. But I wanted to leave you with a first rough draft of what this would look like for Sanguine Tide, so that when you hit level 50 and you start getting Paragon points, you're not left in the dust. You have this as a reference. You can start building it up. If you don't want to think about Paragon until you get way late game, you can just follow this, and there's a decent amount of synergy in this Paragon board draft that will at least get you by and get you going, but we'll look at that towards the end of the video. Let's start, as we always do, with the builder, and we'll work our way through the skill tree. And there's going to be similarities to the Crimson Impaler build, just because they have both Overpower, Fortify. Anytime you run Blood, there's so much synergy for Overpower and Fortify. You want to consider running it, and I think most Blood builds, if not all Blood builds, will utilize that. So we're going to start with Hemorrhage, which gives us a way to build Essence, which is great. You can also spawn Blood Orbs, which is also another way to heal yourself, and we have bonus effects that we can trigger with consuming Blood Orbs. We also allow it so that when you pick up a Blood Orb, your Hemorrhage becomes AoE for 2 attacks, which is really nice, and it gives more Essence generation, and you can Fortify when you hit enemies with your Hemorrhage, which is also really nice. Coming down here, since it is a caster build, we like getting max Essence and core skill damage, which they cost more Essence, but they deal more damage, which is always good, especially later on once you get high amounts of Essence generation. Always worth considering these if you're running a caster build and you have the extra points in your build to spend on these. Next, we're going to pick up Blood Surge, which is the core foundation of this build. It shoots a blood wave around you, a Blood Nova, which deals damage. And what's crucial about this one in general is that when you activate Blood Surge, it detects enemies around you and then deals more damage the more enemies it drains. And this works on the proc effects as well when you proc additional Blood Surges. So you don't want high attack speed with this build. It's actually really good to go high damage and scaling, because you want to get a really good Blood Surge that scales off those enemies. You drain them, you deal damage, you keep doing that. It also is going to force you into melee range to get the maximum benefit out of your Blood Surge. We go and we modify it so that Blood Surge heals us, which is really nice. And when you get 4 or more enemies drawn from, which means the max benefit, you'll be able to heal for even more. Keeps us healthy. We maintain that. It's good for our key passive and a lot of our legendaries. We also want it so that when we hit enemy with Blood Surge, we get fortified. And while you have Fortify over maximum 50% of your health, Blood Surge deals more damage. So we want to get maximum Fortify, stay healthy for long periods of time. The tankier anytime you're running an Overpower build or a Fortify build, the tankier that you are, the more damage that you deal. So tanky equals damage when you're running these builds. So the more Fortify and healing you get, the better you are off for that. For this build, I think you can definitely slot in a Blood Mist. It's amazing. Makes you immune for 3 seconds. At base has a small movement speed penalty, but you heal, which means you become untargetable and you heal yourself, which is great for Fortify builds. Casting a skill Overpower that overpowers reduces the cooldown of Blood Mist. So while this is on cooldown and you're overpowering regularly, you can lower its cooldown. And you also want to modify it so that while you're Blood Misting underneath enemies and you're hitting enemies, you're moving through enemies with Blood Mist, you get Fortify. So you become untargetable when Blood Mist activates. You heal yourself if you're below 100% HP, and you're adding Fortify at the same time. It works beautifully for this build. In this build specifically, I do think you want minions, and so we're gonna have to free up a free slot here. So unlike the Crimson Impaler build, we're not gonna be running with a spell here. We do want minions because we wanna be able to benefit from a really cool unique passive that this build gets that no other build has. But we'll still run with Iron Maiden. Again, Iron Maiden can be slotted out for others. I think this is just the best fit, but it's not like a perfect synergy. I like Iron Maiden in this build because not only do you get a little bit of damage from it, and you damage scaling and damage amp from your Paragon board as well, but also it doesn't cost you any essence and turns into an essence generator. So marking targets with Iron Maiden plus your hemorrhage gives you essence to spend on Blood Nova or Blood Surge, and you also get it so that when you kill an enemy that's marked with your Iron Maiden curse, you heal, which works great for fortify builds. You don't need to put points into it, you can just kind of keep it here, but I think it is a good enough synergy to run. If you wanted to, you could replace it with Corpse Tendrils, which also has decent synergy with this build and most caster builds for Necromancer. Because we're close up for all of our blood surges, we're going to want to run Death's Embrace. It gives us damage reduction and increased damage, which is great. And because we're running skeletal mages, we want to increase the damage and life of skeletal mages as well, so that they can stay up a little bit longer and they don't get cleaved off by damage. And you'll see why in a second, but we want the mages to kill themselves, not to be killed. So the more we can keep them alive with that and then let them kill themselves with their own attack, the better we are off for that. Going into the Macabre tree, there's nothing really we can pick up here unless you elect to go for the Corpse Tendrils variant here. You can splod Blood Orbs with Corpse Tendrils. You can get some crit percent and crit damage on this as well as some CC. The reason I don't like running Corpse Tendrils with this build specifically is you need to be able to spawn enough corpses to be able to keep these buffs active against bosses, and it starts to feel kind of weird, I think. You can run with this, and you can even have the modifier for your mages that create corpses, and you have other corpses there. You can even run options where you run with like a Decompose variant if you wanted to get more corpses in there, but I think that Iron Maiden works just fine. Since we're running an overpowered blood build, I think this whole tree works great. The only question mark for blood passives here in the Macabre portion of the tree is going to be Transfusion. If you don't have minions, you don't need to run this, but I think Transfusion is great for this build because, again, we want to keep the skeletal mages alive, and so we're going to pick this up. So when we chew up a blood orb, we'll heal our minions as well, which keeps them alive and makes it higher likelihood that they kill themselves rather than being killed by enemies, which is important, and we'll talk about that in a second. Gruesome Mending means that when you're low HP, you heal more, which is awesome, keeps you healthy. While you're healthy, blood skills deal more damage, including your ultimate. And hitting enemies with blood skills has a chance to fortify you. This one, since you're pulsing multiple blood surges over and over and over, and from your minions, you get some decent fortify from this, which is great. And also, you increase the overpower damage from blood skills, and it's doubled when you're healthy, which as you get tankier, you should be able to maintain that and get pretty high uptime on it as well. Blood Wave is the ultimate of choice. Excellent ability. A lot of ways you can modify this to make it fit a lot of different builds, shadow builds and blood builds. It does a knockback, it does some damage. It also has a very short cooldown for an ultimate. You can make it so that it slows enemies, which isn't a huge deal. The big one is Supreme Blood Wave, which leaves behind 3 blood orbs. So every time you pop your ultimate, you'll get blood orbs, which gives you healing, it gives you damage proccing, and there's a legendary that we can run that even when you consume a blood orb, it lowers your ultimate cooldown, the cooldown of your ultimate, which means that you use your ultimate, which is already a short cooldown. It spawns 3 blood orbs. You consume those blood orbs for other benefits, but it also lowers the cooldown of your short cooldown ultimate. There's some really cool synergy as that starts to fit together. And then, of course, we want to pick up, this is another one we want to grab here. Anytime you're running minions that you want to keep alive, one of the best ways to do that is Death's Defense. We come down here, we get 1 point in Bonded Essence. We're not going to be consuming corpses enough to get crazy healing from Bonded Essence, but it is required in order to get to Death's Defense. And we don't really need attack speed or damage. You could probably do either one of these if you wanted. The healing is great, but you could if you wanted to go Inspiring Leader. We just need to get to this node here, which is Death's Defense. Minions cannot lose more than 45% of their max life when you have full points into it. Which this means is that minions cannot be one-shot. Excellent. Even at level 1, it means they can't be one-shot. The more points you put into it, when you have 3 points into it, they cannot be two-shot. It makes it a lot easier to keep them alive. Very good to have if you're going to keep minions here, and for this build, very necessary as well. Key passive is Wrathma's Vigor. Increase your max life by 10%, and after being healthy for 15 seconds, it guarantees an overpower. We like this. We love this. It gives us really good damage And for this build, when we have good split of AoE and single target from Blood Surge, it fits even more effectively for that. Helps us kill bosses, helps us do AoEs on top of them. So that is the skill tree for the Sanguine Tide Blood Necro. Going over to the minions here, let's talk about why these are very important. For the Skeletal Warriors, I think you sacrifice them and get magic resistance. You will be in melee range. So keep in mind that unlike the Bloodlance blood build that we put out just before this one, you will be in melee range for this. So you're going to be taking more damage. You might have to stand in persistent AoE effects, magic effects, or take some stray projectiles. So more defense, more magic resist is great. For the Golem, we like sacrificing the Blood Golem because it increases maximum life. For all overpower fortify builds where you have to maintain healthy, it means you have to be at a high HP percentage for long periods of time. When you increase your max life, you make that more reasonable to accomplish because if your total HP is higher, then the amount of HP that you have to go through to get underneath a healthy percentage is bigger. The value itself is bigger, which means you can stay healthier longer. It gives you a little more padding. You can use health as a resource. And then for skeletal mages, I recommend running the bone mages with the blood variant, where these mages will periodically lunge at targets, dealing damage to themselves and dealing damage to the target, which actually does pretty decent damage in general. But when you run this upgrade, when a bone mage dies of its own accord, which means that it deals damage to a target and ends its own life, it'll spawn a corpse and fortify you for 11% of your base life. This is why we want to keep them alive and prevent them from dying from outside sources. We do want them to die, so taking damage is fine. We just want to make sure that when they leap, they're the ones causing their own death, because it spawns a corpse, which we can use, and it fortifies you for a large amount. So as you have these minions going on, you're going to get some extra value there. So we're also going to run Viscous Aspect here, which increases our skeletal mage count by 2. We don't have warriors, we don't have golems, we don't need other effects for that, but this one's great because it just means that you're getting more fortify coming in and you're spawning corpses, which you can benefit from as well. For gems, we like having ultimate skill damage. Blood Wave is going to be going off a lot. We're also going to be resetting the cooldown on it, which is really nice. We have blood orbs from Fast Blood Aspect on your ring. It reduces, consuming a blood orb reduces your ultimate cooldown by up to 1 second each. So you can start reducing that, and the more blood orbs respawn and consume, the faster your ultimate comes back, so you actually get value here. There's other options if you really wanted to get life on kill for recovery or even overpower damage on Ruby. Scaling there is really nice, so both those options are really great. You may even get more value from Ruby here, but that's just something to think about. Ruby for armor, maximum life, we talked about why that's good. Skull on jewelry for armor. You can also, if you really wanted to, get some extra healing or some resistance specifically here, but I think this one's probably going to be your best bet for gems in general. Let's go through the one unique in this build. I know some people have a hesitation towards uniques in builds. I think they're important to put in build theory crafting because it's something to work towards, and some of them are very build defining. So you can think about what's coming down the pipe. It's like, you know, Christmas Eve, you look forward to your presents. So as you start grinding and getting higher and higher, you can slot things in for your amulet, your unique amulet, knowing that this is eventually something you'll unlock for this build. And it's something that when, you know, this video exists down the line, it still is a decent reference. And that's going to be the Death Speaker's Pennant. The other reason why we run minions with this build is when Blood Surge casts a mini nova on your, so when you Blood Surge, you have your echoes, but also your minions pulse a Blood Surge as well. Damage is increased by 10% per target drained. Each one will do the suck that Blood Surge does, draining life and dealing damage. So this works amazing. So when you have your skeletal mages plus your 2 extra, when you Blood Surge, your minions will Blood Surge as well. So it gives you amazing room-wide presence and gives you lots of damage from that, and then a chance to overpower and triggering on that. On top of that, okay, we're gonna get Blood-Bathed Aspect on our weapon. This makes it so Blood Surge echoes again after a short delay, dealing slightly less damage than the first one. So when you Blood Surge again automatically. It just pulses on its own. So if you have good essence generation and you Blood Surge, Blood Surge, Blood Surge, it's gonna Blood Surge, free Blood Surge, Blood Surge, free Blood Surge. So you're just pulsing this crazy shockwave of blood flying around. And then also each of those Blood Surges is triggering on your minions. So you're just creating this constant flood of blood flying over the screen, killing everything in sight. It's super fun to watch. Aspect of the Crowded Sage is great for fortified builds. You heal per second for each close enemy, which is perfect because we're coming in close for Blood Surge anyway. We have close damage reduction for that reason. So while we're standing in a crowd of enemies, our health is constantly going up. This one works great for this build. Also, alternatively, you could go for the unique Harlequin Crest. I think this is a special mention in every build because I think it works in every build in general. But I think this life per second is excellent for an overpower fortify build. For chest, we want damage reduction. Remember, tanky equals damage when it comes to fortify overpower builds. This one means that every time we hemorrhage, we get damage reduction. We like that. Cadaverous aspect. Consuming a corpse increases the damage of your next core skill by a percentage up to maximum. What's great about this is because your minions will be spawning corpses when they die against bosses, if they kill themselves, and also when you're clearing and mobbing, corpses will spawn. The reason I run Cadaverous Aspect in this build is because we're running Blood Mist. And anytime you run Blood Mist, that means that you can run the aspect of Explosive Mist, which means when Blood Mist goes through a corpse, if it touches a corpse for any reason, that corpse explodes. When it detonates a corpse, it lowers its cooldown. The damage from the corpse explosion is not going to be anything spectacular for this, and it's just going to do some minor damage. It might even do decent damage depending on your gear. But we don't care about that. What we care about is when it detonates a corpse, it will lower its own cooldown. On top of the fact that Blood Mist is lower its cooldown when you overpower. So every overpower and every detonated corpse lowers the cooldown on Blood Mist, so that as you're attacking with these blood surges all over the place, you're actually almost fully resetting Blood Mist every time, which means you can go back in and fortify. And this combination, having that, makes it so that you get some crazy bonus to damage from Cadaverous, and you become untargetable and you can maintain your high healthy state, high fortify state, which gives you more overpowered damage in general. Cool synergy, super fun, highly recommend that. Aspect of Disobedience means that you gain armor when you take damage, and since you're in melee range, you're going to be taking damage a lot. You should be able to stack this up all the way to the maximum of value and just have a fat amount of armor. It helps a lot for melee builds. We talked about adding 2 skeletal mages so that you have more ways for them to seppuku, Sudoku, and give you fortify and spawn corpses. And then lastly, aspect of Untimely Death. It means that each percent of your maximum life you heal beyond 100, it gives you bonus overpower damage on your next overpowering attack. I like this for Blood Surge because it's a little bit slower than the Blood Lance build. It's a little bit slower. Getting scaling damage is great because you can actually stack this up and then get, some really nice Blood Surges and then heal up and Blood Surges. And I think overall it should be a really good throughput increase for the build in general. But those are your legendaries, your gems, your skills, your minions, your skill. You'll find this build down below in the description if you want to use it. And lastly, let's go through what I would call a first draft of the Paragon board for this build. For blood builds in general, your 2 primary boards are going to be Bloodbath, because there's tons of overpower and blood synergy here, and Blood Begets Blood. Hopefully with blood being in the name of the title, that makes very clear sense to you, but we like picking those up. So let's quickly run through the Paragon board so we're aware of what's in here. Again, these will likely have to change a lot once the game is live and I can do more testing, but just to be aware of what's going on there. First, let's talk about stats. Stats are very important. Stats are different for every class in the game. They do different things. There's a global stat value, and then each class gets benefits from different stats based on what class they are. For Necromancer, Dexterity gives crit, Intelligence gives skill damage, and Willpower gives resource generation. Unlike the build for Bloodlance, you don't need as much resource generation. I think Intelligence is just going to be a much better evaluation here, but having some is good, and you can also modify healing with Willpower in some situations as well. So we're going to come up from the base board. We're going to pick up the defenses here. Percent life is huge. We know that. Anytime we see it, we want to pick it up. I recommend getting the Imbiber glyph in the middle here, which increases damage while healthy. You should be very, very easily able to maintain a healthy state, which gives you a fat amount of damage. And then when you get 25 willpower at least, which means 5 of these willpower nodes, or a little bit extra of these 7s here, you'll get increased potion healing, which again allows you to maintain healthy state, increases your damage. And then you want to pick up both the defense here as well as the offense percent damage plus extra int, which is really nice. We're going to come up into the Bloodbath board, which is going to be your primary board. So we're going to spend a lot of our points in this one, and Blood Begets Blood. We get a lot of value from that. We're going to come up here to the glyph. We like having it above because the glyph is easily accessible. This is going to give us healing received, including blood orbs, damage while fortified. We're fortified a lot, and then we get a lot of stats here. For the glyph, I like running Undaunted. 5 willpower purchased. Each one gives you damage while fortified. And if you have 25 willpower, again, 5 of these, if you get 25 total, you activate the additional bonus, which gives you damage reduction the more fortified you have. Again, more damage reduction, more defense equals damage because we stay in that state longer. We will pick up the legendary node, which gives us attacks that guarantee overpower, have increased overpowered damage. For this particularly, our key passive gives us this. Every 15 seconds, we get a guaranteed one, which can really proc. You can also get some guaranteed ones coming in from these if you really wanted to. I just think that the Fortify is probably a little bit more useful, but you can swap over if you feel like this will be a guaranteed overpower crit, which works well with that glyph that we just mentioned. Getting these overpower nodes, super nice, high damage there, and then also getting damage while fortified, plus the GOAT. These magic nodes that give fortified generation are almost required for these builds because they go a long way in making the build a lot better. All of your fortify scales off of this, even if it's a small amount, it's still worth picking up. Then we're going to cut over left into Blood Begets Blood, another blood board that has overpower and healing and self-healing and orbs in it, which is really nice. We're going to pick up damage for X seconds after picking up a blood orb, which means we're spawning blood orbs with hemorrhage, which is great. And also every time we blood wave our ultimate, we'll spawn blood orbs and consume them. Super nice. You'll get damage off of that. And damage while healthy is free to pick up as well. Coming up here gives you more overpower damage. Fits in the build perfectly. More potion healing is excellent. You could probably even drop these healing over time nodes if you wanted to, but I think the potion healing is useful, which means that you can stay healthy longer. All of that works really well together. And we will want the blood orb healing as well, plus the percent life. We've already talked about that being really good. For the node here, we come in and we get the glyph Dominate. This increases overpower damage. When you overpower an enemy, all damage they take from you is increased from you and your minions as well. And then the passive triggers with 25 willpower, which is very easy to pick up, getting that in this node. Plus we get more overpower damage. We get more blood orb healing. You can see how the synergy is all lining up for this in general. I also like sticking Wither on top here because it does have a defensive node, set of nodes at the very bottom. So when we move up into it, it's just, you peek your toe in, you touch it, grab it, and you can head out. This one gives you potion healing and percent life. Again, we know percent life is really good. Potion healing is very good for that as well. We're also going to stick Scent of Death on the left of Blood Begets Blood because as we come in here, more potion healing. You can also pick up more potion healing here if you have the points. And you can also get percent life off of these, plus more percent life off of that as well. So very easy to kind of dip our toes into nearby boards to get beneficial stats, but our main focus is on Bloodbath and Blood Begets Blood because all of that affects our build and our synergies. So you can imagine this build coming together, suicidal minions that explode, spawning tons and tons of blood surges flying all over the screen. I also like this build because you don't really care whether your minions live or die. You just care that they live long enough to kill themselves versus dying to an enemy, and you're just kind of running around and there's just waves of blood. You're almost like a terrifying waterbender that has found a new use for your blood bending magic. It's crazy, it's super fun. So if you found value in this video, leave a like down below. Comment as well. All comments help the video get seen by more people. Let me know what you think about the build, how you would change the build, how you would modify it, or if you're going to be running this for your release, Necromancer, let me know as well. And of course, come by the live stream and come by and say hi. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.